whenever Nietzsche says, God is dead, the famous God is dead parable. And the interesting thing is he's not talking to people who believe in God. In the parable, he's talking to people who don't believe in God. He's talking to people who are the enlightened people. And then this madman says, God is dead and you have killed him. And his blood is on your hands, and goes on to describe this. What's interesting about that is Nietzsche's not saying you religious people or you people who believe in God, you have to encounter the death of God. He's saying that the kind of enlightened secular world hasn't encountered the death of God. And that's the fascinating thing. And so that idea really struck me, because for me, the secular world is profoundly religious, profoundly ideological. I went to LA because it's the mecca of religion. Every corner, someone's promising wholeness and completeness, commodity satisfaction, sexual liberation, psychedelic enlightenment, all of these fame, like these promises of wholeness and completeness, that the church doesn't like hold a candle to that shit anymore, right? It's like, if you want the religious message of wholeness and completeness, even of living forever, is kind of more found in the tech world, where potentially death will be overcome in a variety of ways, through technology, through uploading our consciousness, through augmenting our bodies, or some stoic idea that, oh, well, don't worry about death, because when death arrives, you're not around to have it. So when you're alive, death isn't there. When you're dead, you're not around. Yeah. So those are the two good news. One is basically, it's like, you don't have to encounter death. You don't have to encounter death by biohacking and hoping in technology will get us somewhere. Or don't worry about death because, we never meet death. No, no, no. The good news is you're already dead. You just don't know it, right? That's the good news of Christianity, from a radical Christianity, is that there's a fundamental sense in which we are, in the words of Julie Reich, the constellation of death. Life is the constellation of death. Castration, there is a fundamental loss. It's not that the move to being human is a fundamental gain. In a sense, something drops out. There's a fundamental loss, a signifier drops out, however you want to say it. But castration is that the passage into life is through a fundamental giving up. On a very simple level, you can think about a relationship. You can be in a relationship with somebody and it's already dead, but the two people just don't know it. It's manifesting in the health of the children, in affairs, or in alcohol abuse or workaholism, or, it's manifesting, but the two people don't know that the relationship's dead, right? Now, what they might eventually do is go to a therapist. And it's not so much to try to figure out the relationship. They go to the analyst or the therapist, and in a way, what they're doing is symbolizing the death that's already taken place. That's what they're doing. They're almost going like, they have to put words to the death. They have to realize that this is already dead. They just didn't know it. When you do that, one of two things can happen. You can either stay together, break up with the type of relationship you had, or break up entirely and move different directions. But things cannot stay the same. You start to symbolize the death, and a transformation happens. And if that doesn't happen, what occurs is you can split up with the person, but not with the type of relationship you have. So you enter into repetition, and you have the same type of relationship with the next person, and the next person, and the next person. So that's one way. Then, in a more fundamental way, you can think about what Winnicott calls primal agony, which is what a lot of people suffer from. I know people who suffer from this. Is at late at night, they're overcome with absolute terror of some loss that's going to happen. Their partner's going to leave them. They're going to lose their job. The world is going to collapse through climate change, or the economy is going to collapse, right? Some of these are very reasonable positions that someone might have, but it's primal agony. It's overwhelming. It's terrifying. Now, for Winnicott, again, the idea is that, well, the good news here is the catastrophe isn't coming. It's already happened. This is an echo of some fundamental loss that you experienced as an infant, but have not been able to symbolize. So what you're terrified is going to happen is, in a way, what has already happened, but you haven't been able to tarry with it. So in primal agony, you begin to look at that fundamental loss, like you were sent off to boarding school, and it separated you from your parents in a traumatic kind of way, whatever it is. And you start to talk about the boarding school experience and that loss, and then suddenly the primal agony starts to dissipate. You still might be scared of those things, but it's not primal agony. And then at a more fundamental level, which is the Lacanian level, is it's actually, because that's still in your history, but this idea of original sin, originary lack, is that to be a subject at all is to undergo a fundamental experience of lack, of death. And again, what's important is to somehow symbolize that, to put symbols to it, to tarry with it. People go like, well, why are you doing liturgy? What's the point of this? So like, it's to symbolize the death that you already are. To encounter this lack in some way through music, through poetry, through art, to gather as a communion around this shared loss. I think that's a fundamentally important thing. It's not just if you've got a particular trauma, you go to a psychoanalyst, but there's the traumas that happen to you, but there is the trauma that is you, right? And the trauma that is you is something that I think we need a space where we can, let's ultimately say, find a way to enjoy that trauma, to rob it of its suffering. Not entirely, but to allow that suffering to somehow be productive.